Okay, so we've talked about the fact that you've got the skeletal system in your body, and it has all these amazing functions. It's got protection and storage of nutrients and production of red blood cells. It gives you your body a certain shape, form. It supports organs, and it helps you to move around. These 6 criteria, these 6 things that your body, your skeleton does, right? But, and we talked about the fact that you've got 5 different types of bones. You got flat bones and long bones and short bones and irregular bones and sesamoid bones and all these other kinds of bones, all this variety. But what exactly are the bones? What are the major bones? What are the bones you have in your body? Well, you have about 206 bones in your body as an adult. As a child, as an infant, not all the bones are fused completely together. Your pelvis is not complete, your skull is not complete. The bones still have some growing to do to fuse together into one bone, okay? But once you're an adult, you have 206 bones. So let's talk about what these different types of bones are. We'll start with the head. The bone up here is called the cranium, and its job is, of course, to protect the skull and house the sense organs and all that kind of stuff. Attached to the cranium is the mandible. The mandible and the cranium together we simply call a skull. That's the 2 things together, okay? But though without the mandible, we would just call this the cranium, all right? That's the skull bone. The cranium bone, and then we have the mandible. Now, holding all of that up, we have this vertebral column. The vertebral column contains 30 bones, 30 of them. We've got 7 cervical vertebrae. Those are in our neck. You can feel the cervical vertebrae. If you go back right here in the middle of your neck, especially down here close to your shoulders, you feel those bones that are poking out, those bones. That's the tips or the spinous processes of the lower cervical vertebrae. You've got, C6, C7, C5, those in there. Those are the ones that are going to produce those particular bumps on your back. So you can find the cervical. The first 2 cervical are very important, by the way. The first cervical vertebrae is called the atlas because it holds the head. Like the god Atlas. Well, no, he's not really a god, is he? I guess he's a titan. Like the Titan Atlas, holding the earth. Yes. I don't know. Oh, look, Atlas Shrugged. You'll have to look that one up. It's a very famous novel, but it's all kind of pagan ideas. No, I mean, you can make that judgment on your own. All right, so that's the atlas, and that's the upper vertebrae, the first vertebrae, because it supports the skull, which in our bodies is like everything, okay? It's got the brain, it's got all that kind of stuff. The second, oh, by the way, the atlas allows us to do this. We can nod. Isn't that the wonderful? It's the power of saying yes, okay? The second vertebrae is called the axis. And just like the axis of the earth is that line around which the earth rotates, the axis, our second vertebrae, allows us to go no, like that. It has this little, what's called this little finger-like projection that literally articulates inside of the atlas, allowing it to go. So we have the atlas and the axis. Those have special names. The rest of them really don't have special names. So those 2, all right? Then we have, so those first 7 vertebrae are the cervical vertebrae. By the way, all mammals have 7 cervical vertebrae. So I don't care if you're a little tiny mouse or a big giant giraffe, you have 7 cervical vertebrae, all mammals. Well, forgive me, all mammals except the manatee. Manatee has 6. Got to be different. I don't know, everyone has their thing, a manatee's thing. Yeah, I only have 6 cervical vertebrae. I'm not like you. I'm different. I'm special. I got 6. So maybe that's the manatee's thing. I don't know. So those are the 6 cervical vertebrae. Okay, continuing on down the vertebral column, the vertebrae that have ribs attached to them, those are called the thoracic vertebrae. The thoracic vertebrae. And they would be kind of up here, kind of in the upper part of your back, in between your shoulder blades, right there. That's your thoracic vertebrae. And you've got 12 of those, all right? 12 thoracic vertebrae. Attached to the thoracic vertebrae and wrapping around your body are the ribs. And you have 12 pair of ribs. And by the way, it is not true. It is a myth that guys have 1 less rib than girls. Okay? Unless your name is Adam and you're like 6,000 something years old, you got the same number of ribs as everybody else. Okay? Because God only took it from Adam. He didn't take it from anybody else. So guys, you have 12 pair. Girls, you have 12 pair. Unless there is some anomaly or an injury or something else that caused that to be different. You were born normally with 12 pair, guy or girl. Okay, so, and those wrap all the way around. That is your rib cage right here. By the way, your ribs, you have 3 different types of ribs, by the way. You have the true ribs. The true ribs are attached to the vertebrae in the back, and they come all the way around the front, and they attach to the sternum, your breastbone. They attach to the sternum in the front. Those are your true ribs. And then you have false ribs. Those are ribs that come around from the back. They attach to the vertebrae. They come around, and they're not attached directly to the sternum. Instead, they're attached to the rib next to them, that's attached to the rib next to them, that's eventually attached to the rib that's attached to the sternum. Okay? So you have the ribs that attach to the sternum, true ribs. You have the ribs that attach to the ribs that attach to the sternum, false ribs. And then you have little tiny ribs way back here near where your kidneys are. Right there, I can't tell because I'm not looking at the camera if you can see that or not, but they're back there. And those little tiny ribs are only attached to the vertebrae. They're not attached all the way around, and therefore those are called floating ribs. So you've got 3 types of ribs. They're attached to the sternum, which is the breastbone in the front. Continuing on down beyond the thoracic vertebrae, we have the lumbar vertebrae, and you have 5 of those. Those 5 lumbar vertebrae tend to be very thick, wide, and they tend to be the part of the lower back. They're right between your ribs and your pelvis. That's the lower back, and you've got 5 of those big, thick, sturdy, forming this great column, helping you to stay upright and have good posture. Right? Very important. When you work out your core muscles, that's all working around to give your body support. You got to take care of the core, people, because everything hangs off the core. Everything hangs off the core. Below the lumbar vertebrae, you have what is called the sacrum. Now, the sacrum is actually fused with your pelvis to create the pelvic girdle, but the sacrum is actually 5 sacral vertebrae that are all fused together into one bone. And that's the bone right where your gluteus maximi on either side come together. It forms that little triangle right there, kind of at the top of your behind muscles. They connect right there, and that is part of your sacrum. That's the sacral vertebrae. Below that, I call it the roller skating vertebrae or the ice skating vertebrae, depending upon what you like. But that's that little tiny bone that when your skates go right up from underneath you and you land on the floor, that's the bone that goes out. It's the little tiny thing, and it is called the coccyx. And that is the last of the vertebrae. Technically, the coccyx is like 4 tiny coccygeal vertebrae fused together. So technically, you have 33 total vertebrae if you count the little fused coccyx pieces, these coccygeal bones. But if you don't count those, you really just have 30. And that's what we'll go with. Okay, so that's the vertebral column, right? Now, coming off of the upper part, your skeleton, you have producing what is called that's, by the way, is your axial skeleton. It's the bones that kind of make the axis, the up and down part. Now we have the appendicular skeleton. The appendicular are your appendages. Okay, so your appendages, the first one, we're going to deal with the upper arm first. You've got the collarbone or clavicle right here. It attaches in, you can feel the 2 bumps. Those are the 2 ends of your clavicle, the 2 hard bony bumps right there, and they go all the way across, and you can feel them all the way across until they terminate right out there at the top of your shoulder, the point of your shoulder right there. That's where they're going to terminate. That's the collarbone. This is the one that if you're wearing a seatbelt and you get into an accident, that's the one that usually breaks. So if you've ever, that's really easy to break. Football injuries, car accident injuries, oftentimes results in a broken clavicle. And that's why that seatbelt yanks against it. It's not a real big sturdy bone, okay? So that attaches from the sternum over here, and it connects up with your shoulder blades. Your shoulder blades, or the scapula. The scapula is your shoulder blade. It's on the back. It's back here, this part right here. Sometimes you can grab a chair and stick your shoulder blades out, things like that. You can do weird tricks with your shoulder blades. They're kind of flexible, all right? But they're kind of on your back and they can move in and out. If you've ever seen like one of the videos of like a leopard walking or a cheetah, those shoulder blades kind of go up like this when they're walking. Those are the shoulder blades. You've got them too, they're back there. Those connect up over here with your clavicle and they allow for a hanging spot. They create kind of a socket and they allow for your humerus to attach. That's your upper arm bone right here. That's your humerus. Okay, below the humerus, you have two bones in your forearm. You have the ulna. The ulna goes from the elbow, and you can actually feel the ulna going all the way down until it attaches to your pinky. That bone right there, that is your wrist bone, the one you feel right there, is actually the bottom part or the distal end of your ulna. Your radius starts up over here. You can kind of feel it in there, but it disappears into the forearm muscles really quick until it reappears about maybe 3/4, 4/5 of the way down. You can feel it there, and it ends in that wrist bone right there, and you can feel that right there. So those two wrist bones are actually your forearm bones, and they come down. This one is called the radius. This one's called the ulna. Cool thing about the radius is that if you put your elbow on the table with your palm up like this, you can rotate your arm over and your ulna doesn't move. It stays right there. Your radius, however, is going and it's flopping over. A radius, like a circle, the radius of a circle, the radius helps you to rotate that palm and get it over your the ulna. It helps your hand to be able to do this, you know, kind of like that. All right, so that's the radius. Now, attached to the radius, you have 8 other bones right here in your wrist. Those are called the carpals. And then you have 5 metacarpals. They would be in the palm of your hand through here. You have 5 metacarpals. And then you have all of these phalanges. You've got 3 here and 3 here and 3 here and 3 here and 2 there. The thumb has to be different, okay? Because it's opposable. It opposes everything. It just doesn't agree with any of the other fingers at all. It's always taking the opposite position. Never mind. All right, so these are your phalanges. You have the proximal phalange because it's closest to you. You have that's the proximal right here. You have the distal phalange because it's the furthest away from you. And you have the medial phalange because it's in the middle. And you have that on all of your 4 fingers. You have proximal, you have distal, and you have medial on all of them, okay? So those are the bones of the upper arm. They would form the part of the appendicular skeleton. Coming down, let us now descend to the lower body. So, in the lower body, the lower appendicular skeleton, you have the pelvis, which is this right here, your hip bones. These consist of 3 different bones on each side, not counting the sacrum in the back. You have the ilium, which is the part when you put your hands, you know, like, really? I mean, really? Are you really gonna... I can't believe the attitude. I just can't believe it. I just can't. Okay, that's the ilium. You're putting your hands akimbo. When your hands are on your hips, that is where it is. You then have the ischium. That's the bone back there inside of your behind muscles. That is the one that when you're sitting on a hard bench and you kind of go on the one side and then onto the other side, and you can kind of roll that bone back and forth, your behind muscles. That allows you to, that is the ischium. And then you have the bone in the front that connects everything together in your front, and that is called the pubis. And you have the pubis, ilium, and ischium on the right side, and the pubis, ilium, ischium on the left side, and they're all fused together with your sacrum in the back, and that forms the pelvic girdle, holding on to your legs. Below your legs, below your upper leg bone, you have the femur. There's your femur. It is the largest bone in your body. It is the thigh bone. Going down even further, or right on in the end of the femur, you have the patella. The patella is the kneecap. It's the bone right there. Now the patella is a sesamoid bone. That means that it does not actually connect with other bones. It's embedded in the tendon. It's embedded in the tendon. We have the quadriceps muscle right here, and then you have the patellar tendon that connects down here to the upper part of the shin bone. I'll talk about that in a second. And that patella helps to give a good angle of pull on your shin so that you can go rah when you kick, you like whoa, kick, whoa, like karate or soccer, whoa, and you can do all that great stuff. And that's because your patella gives this muscle a much more advantageous angle of attack to yank your foot forward. And now moving down even further, you have two bones in your lower leg. You have this big wide bone here on the inside. That is called, we call it your shin. That is actually your tibia. The tibia is the large bone. It connects right up here. Most of what is connecting, the big bony thing you feel here at the top, that is actually the top of your tibia. Your tibia goes all the way down and it ends right there. Your ankle bone is actually the lower part of your tibia. Now, coming on the outside, you can feel a bone out here on the outside of your knee. That is actually the outside of the fibula. Now the fibula, like your radius, very quickly disappears into your calf muscles and does not reappear until you're 3/4, 4/5 of the way through the calf muscle. And it terminates way down here, I'm about to fall over, in your outside ankle bone. So way down there, that's your tibia and fibula. The tibia is on the inside. It forms that flat bone that we call the shin. Now, attached down here, underneath those two bones, we have the calcaneum, which is the heel bone. And then you have 6 other bones that are attached to the calcaneum, the tibia, and the fibula, and they form what is called the tarsals. And the tarsals are all inside of here. That's your ankle bones. Then the tarsals, we have the metatarsals right across here. Those would be the bones that you would like, if you put your shoe on and tied up your laces, they're the bones that your laces would cross over like that. And then once you have those, below those, once again, you have phalanges. And you have, of course, with the toes, your big toe only has 2, like your thumb. The other toes all have 3, and you have the proximal, because it's closest to you. You have the distal, because it's furthest away. And you have the medial, because it's in the middle. And those, my friends, are the bones of the body. Yay.